Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, we're going to go live immediately to a press conference already in progress with the Manhattan DA's office, a big announcement in regards to the indictment of Luigi Mangione. We're going to go live right now up on the screen. The press conference is already in progress in regards the indictment has been announced.
That includes our focus on the growing threat of ghost guns, one of which was used in this attack. The NYPD remains committed to tracking down and removing these untraceable weapons from our streets. And we will do that work hand in hand with District Attorney Bragg here in Manhattan and in every other borough to ensure that those who possess, distribute, and use these weapons are held fully accountable. Finally, I want to again thank every member of the NYPD, uniform and civilian, working on this case, led, of course, by our great Chief Kenny, whether in Midtown North Squad, Homicide, the Crime Scene Unit, Intelligence Bureau, and everywhere else. All of you contributed to today's indictment, and you've brought the Thompson family one step closer to justice in this case. Thank you.
We're going to take on-topic question. Shayna? Can you elaborate on the terrorism theory and not just on what elements do you expect people to do?
Sure. So, in its most basic terms, this was a killing that was intended to evoke terror. And we've seen that reaction. The statutory elements we can go into, but its most basic term, that's what this is. This was not an ordinary killing, not to suggest that any killing is ordinary, but this was extraordinary. And the New York State Legislature has, set out, both the paths that we talk about, both the murder one and murder two. And this, we allege, is certainly squarely within those statutes, which talk about intending to do exactly what we saw happen here.
Anthony?
Maybe Chief Kenny could get into this, but I'm wondering sort of the timeline between December 6th, when the FBI was notified by the San Francisco police about this missing person that was called in from Luigi's mother, the time that they contacted you about this. Were you aware of this when he was arrested, or was this something that was still being processed at the time? And what did his
So the original missing report took place back in November 18th in San Francisco. The sergeant that was involved in that case reached out to the San Francisco field office and said, hey, basically, I'm working on a missing case. I saw the photograph that was distributed by the NYPD. There bears a resemblance. That tip was forwarded to us close to 45 hours after the incident took place. It showed up to a TFO, which is a task force officer. We have NYPD officers embedded with the FBI. They received that tip. It was one of 4 tips that they had received that day, and they were vetting it. Part of that vetting process was that they reached out to Mangione's mother in San Francisco very late on the 7th. They had a conversation where she didn't indicate that it was her son in the photograph, but she said it might be something that she could see him doing. So that information was going to be passed along to the detectives the next morning, but fortunately we apprehended him before that we could act on that.
The commissioner has talked about how the defendant's been lionized and celebrated. I'm wondering how concerned you are about a potential jury knowing that someone on that jury would be someone who would lionize and celebrate it.
Well, I want to echo the commissioner's words and concerns, which I think were put forth beautifully. I mean, we see a lot in these jobs. I meet with the families of homicide victims, and I just can't wrap my head around the notion that someone is celebrating this. To your specific question, we're at the beginning of a litigation now with our charge. We have phenomenal trial team in place, led by ADA Joel Seidman, who is, been in this office for more than 40 years and handled some very challenging matters. We have a voir process in place. I have faith in our jury system to select 12 people who can be fair and impartial, but we'll move forward, and that's something well down the road, but we'll be ready when that time comes.
Two questions if possible. One will be about Mr. Thompson's family. But first, I want just maybe to explain more to viewers how you come to the conclusion that this is not terrorism. I think it's an important part of this. And so I'm hoping maybe you can explain that a little more, sort of define the statute here.
Sure, and my point, the statute talks about attempts to influence or coerce a civilian population. The statute talks about intending to influence a policy of government, and it talks about seeking to, put forth things sort of similar to that by murder. So the statute, plain language of the statute is clear. Obviously, we've charged it. The grand jury has voted on it, and we intend to go forward and prove it. But I think it does help to take a step back, and think about the proof in the case, some of the writings. I'm not going to get into too much of that, but in the actual reaction, in the middle of Midtown, the beginning of a busy day, tourists, commuters, business people, the intent was to sow terror.
And if I could just on Mr. Thompson's family, sadly, as you say, not a lot of focus has been given to Mr. Thompson or his family. I'm wondering if the services folks, any of the folks in your office, have been talking to them about what that's been like. Is anything you can say about that?
I'm not going to talk about communications.
This is a live press conference from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. They have just announced that they are going to indict Luigi Mangione for murder first degree as a terroristic act and 2 counts of murder second degree. Also, the word terror was used in both of the counts of murder.
With the family, other than to say that we have a robust survivor services staff here that is second to none. But I did not talk about communications with any family. I don't think it'd be appropriate. But I appreciate your concern.
Well, it's just because, like you're saying, there's been so much focus on the suspect.
Yeah.
It's quite different.
I echo what the commissioner said, and the sentiment of your question. My heart goes out to it. This is a significant piece of what we do here. Is we center the trauma of survivors and victims and their families. A significant piece of what I do is sit across the table and look people in the eye, and when appropriate, if they want to, offer a hug. And we have dedicated advocates and counselors and great staff that focuses on that. So I agree completely with you. And I wish that that's where the public's focus was exclusively. That's where it should be. That's where it is here, in addition to obviously the facts and the law in the case. But because of respect for where your question's coming from, I'm not going to get into communications.
Given the celebration of
This is the Manhattan DA's office, Alvin Bragg. Reporters are asking questions right now.
Yes, absolutely. And we've seen a real increase, sustained increase since December 4th in concern, not just from CEOs, but from corporations broadly. And so going back to the DA's point, the intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, which is, of course, at the root of our state terrorism statute, is very much borne out in this reaction. And for good reason. We've had a torrent of online threats. We've had real world activity that the police commissioner flagged, which is abhorrent, and it causes concern. So we have done a lot to work with corporate security partners with whom we partner on a daily basis in this city, at the city level, at the state level, trying to make sure that everybody has the best practices that they need, that they know where to flag not just general ambient concerns, but specific threats that they might be receiving that a few weeks ago they might have written off as just noise in the online environment, that they now take seriously. So these are ongoing conversations that we have, and thanks to all the work that we do together every day, we're quite confident that concerns and threats are going to be appropriately directed our way.
We're gonna take 2 more. Yep. Dear Brad, can you describe just how rare it is for your office to charge with first-degree murder? There has been some talk about how that is reserved in very specific cases in Manhattan. And also, if you could speak to the statements made on the record by a suspect that informed this timeline in particular, because maybe it's incriminating or statements that happened.
So I'll address the first piece. The first degree murder statute has a number of subsections. They're sort of clearly delineated, and they are reserved for, the most abhorrent conduct, killing a police officer, serial killing, and the terrorism is one subsection of that. And so I would say, fortunately, that's not happening a lot. Taking a step back, I can't think of another office that is more equipped to handle a terrorism charge. We have a great terrorism unit. We were at the forefront of getting the statute passed. Within the last 2 years, we've tried 2 very significant terrorism cases, one involving an English-speaking operative based in Jamaica, and another involving someone who was here and funding overseas terrorism by cryptocurrency. So we have the expertise, and as I mentioned, the expertise on this team, and so we're prepared to go forward.
Have a lot of statements?
Yeah, I'm not going to go beyond what's in the filing.
All right, last question, Laura.
Hey, Brad, are you able to say now, I know it takes, but that you will be seeking the maximum sentence?
So as a matter of practice, I don't talk about sentencing outside of court as a first matter, and certainly not at the initial stages of a matter. But I think you can tell the seriousness with which we take this matter by the way in which it's charged. The murder in the second degree actually has a mandatory life without parole sentence, no discretion for the judge at all. So that's the maximum there. But I'm not going to go beyond that. We will first get the defendant to New York. We will have him arraigned. We will be before our judge. We will engage in pretrial litigation. If there's a trial, we're ably equipped to do that. And then we will proceed to sentencing, at which point we'll make our arguments in court. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
I was taking your book.
So that was the press conference from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, Alvin Bragg. We did learn some new things in this press conference that we didn't know. First of all, we somewhat expected it, but we were still surprised in hearing it. The top charge is murder in the first degree based on a terroristic act. So he's being charged, Mike, and I'm glad I have an attorney here with me to explain these charges in this statute. So he is being charged with murder in the first degree. And one of the things they addressed was the fear of copycats, the fear of this growing into sort of like more terrorists coming out of the woodwork in these attacks on corporate heads. We saw there was like the deck of cards type thing. There was lists across Manhattan on polls where people were listing the names of other CEOs that might be targeted by people of the same mindset of Luigi Mangione. And that was one of the biggest fears. So they came down swiftly with this indictment: murder in the first degree, 1 count based on a terrorist act, and 2 counts of murder in the second degree. Also, terrorism was mentioned in the murder second degree count. Mike, you got the floor.
Oh, Bill, I just want to address one of the people in the chat. Kay Me, she was asking about the difference between second-degree murder, which is what we thought he'd be charged with, and first-degree murder, which Luigi has been charged with. Second-degree murder is I hate to say it, but your regular premeditated murder. That's of an individual. That's second-degree murder. Murder first degree is if you kill premeditatedly, but it's a correctional officer, police officer, first responder, firefighter, a judge, a witness, those sorts of things, or you kill more than 2 people, you torture people to death, the really horrific stuff. So the difference is the number of people you kill, who you kill, and how you kill. So that raises up the seriousness from second-degree murder to first-degree murder. In this case, he's being charged with murdering a single individual with the intent to cause terror. And so you have to go from section 125.27, which is New York State's penal code dealing with murder, over to section 490.05 to get the description and the definition of terror. And what Alvin Bragg is saying is that the murder that Luigi committed was intended to intimidate a certain population or to coerce civilians and scare civilians in a particular situation, like in New York City, or he did it to influence government policy. And so I think what he's saying is that Luigi not only just wanted to kill one person, he singled out a particular person, and their death would be a message to the greater people in the city and the government, maybe New York State government, New York City government. The death was sending a particular message. And I think Bragg is going to basically looked at some of his writings that we know about, the 2-page, what they call a manifesto. And somewhere in there, he's finding certain words that he thinks is intended to cause for this Brian Thompson's death, to cause a change in government policy, intimidate a particular part of the population, coerce the government to do something. There's a lot more investigation. You've talked about this. Michael Vecchione talked about this the other day. There's a lot more investigation. But right now, Alvin Bragg thinks he has enough to make a prima facie case that this was a murder, not just of a particular individual, but it was a particular individual who had a special status. And that status was a leader of a CEO of a company, that healthcare company, and his death would send a message, it would intimidate people, it would coerce people, it would change government policy. So we don't know what else is out there. We'll learn more from his phone, from his laptop. But right now, he feels that he has enough to make out a terrorism based, interestingly, on what Luigi himself provided with his manifesto.
Mike, someone in the chat, let me see if I could find it right now. I just went from the chat before. Oh, yes, Mary from the chat just joined. Wow. Luigi mother said she could see Luigi doing the crime. Did I hear that correctly? Just joined the chat. Mary, you did hear that correctly. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which it leads me to believe, obviously, we're not being told everything. We're not being told all the truth. We're not being told. I'm really baffled by the time that Luigi's mom called the San Francisco police, said apparently, and we're not getting verbatim what she said exactly, but the photo released in New York looks like my son, or my son's missing. And that, how did that take 4 days to get to the NYPD before the FBI vetted it? That is absolute bullshit. It is absolute bullshit. I'm telling you that right now. Why do you need to vet it? Just give it to the NYPD. They have a suspect. And why did it take 4 days for the FBI to get it to the... I'm just so annoyed at that. And for them to try to sell that to us is just garbage. They use the French word for garbage. It's garbage. Mike.
Bill, it's unconscionable. 4 days. Can you imagine how far someone can get? They can get across the country. They get overseas. where maybe we don't have an extradition treaty in 4 days. That's a lifetime. Why didn't they give that tip to the police like they got it, give it to them quickly, and let our homicide detectives, the best in the world, the most experienced in the world, figure out what it means? Is it really valuable? Or is it just amusing from some woman? Let's see. Why would the FBI need to vet it? That doesn't make sense.
Makes no sense at all, Mike.
Yeah.
Well, they're vetting it for what? For what reason? To give it to another law enforcement agency? They have the same tools to vet it. Let them vet it. They don't need you holding on to it for 4 days. This is why the FBI needs to be shooken up. Exactly events like this, Mike. Exactly.
Bill, the idea that they are going to hold on to it and see if it's a good tip or something like that is crazy. The chief of detectives, Kenny, is like, being nice about it, but I'm sure behind closed doors, he's on the phone with some FBI people and he's cursing them out. This is ridiculous. If the NYPD had information on a federal investigation into some sort of possible terrorist act, some horrific, attack, maybe say Midtown Manhattan, and we didn't give it to the FBI for 4 days because we didn't know whether it was a good tip or not. We ourselves, the detectives like you or Phil, had to vet it. You held on to it for 4 days. They would be screaming bloody murder at the NYPD.
Mike, it's so stupid. It's not even believable. It's
Right.
really, and I love Joe Kenny, the chief of detectives, but maybe he's just trying to do damage control
I
toward
think
the FBI because it's not, as you said, behind the scenes, he's probably screaming at people. Are you kidding me? Someone from the chat, this is a great question. Star Vallette, was the gun he was carrying at McDonald's the actual murder weapon? Can somebody clarify? Yes, it was. And the reason we know that is because there's something called brass catcher. All right, I'm going to show you a shell. This is a simulation, a spent shell very similar to the ones ejected from the firearm at the shooting scene. What you see there is a firearm pin impression in the now I'm losing my thought, in the primer. In the primer.
Yeah.
So that is positively identifiable for the exact bullet it came from the firearm it was fired from. Here's another look. These are the extractor marks on the shell casings that were recovered on the ground. Matched exactly that firearm. So my question to you is, my answer to you is yes, it matched. It is the firearm. Even though it's a ghost gun, does not mean it can't be traced. It just means it doesn't have a serial number. And it was made using a 3D printer, and then we're not going to go into the whole thing, how it was made. But yes, it is the firearm. This may give you a better view of a spent shell to see all the different marks that are on the spent shell casing that can positively identify it as coming from a very specific firearm. So I hope that I answered your question. And then there's other pieces of forensic evidence. His fingerprints on a water bottle left at the scene. His fingerprints or a partial print left on the cell phone left at the scene. His prints or a partial print left on a wrapper of a I think it was a protein bar he bought in Starbucks. So all of this evidence is forensic evidence that connects him to the scene. And really, how would we all feel if they didn't recover this gun? We'd be like, oh, how do we know this is the guy? They recovered the gun on him. That is such powerful evidence, Mike.
Yeah, Billy, they didn't find the gun in a trash can in Midtown Manhattan or in a gutter like a lot of people do, or that sort of thing. No, they didn't find that. They found it on him. He has the manifesto. Why would you have all these things? We laugh at it now, but as bright as he is and as slick as he is, and he got out of New York City really quick, and I have to give him credit for that. He's a newbie in murder. And so being a newbie in murder, it doesn't matter what your IQ is. You're new at this, and what you're doing is you're committing a homicide. And we have the world's best homicide detectives. You're on their court. You're playing on their field. They have the home field advantage. He didn't know about all those things. Perhaps maybe didn't really think about it all that much, about the DNA. Who knows? But he's got no one to blame but himself for now facing a murder one charge. If he did not have that manifesto, if he did not have that firearm, all the police may have had is to hold, to kind of connect him to this, is maybe a partial fingerprint. Now, you could always argue if you only have a partial fingerprint and there's maybe, say, 8 or 10 points of similarity between what was found on a water bottle or what was found on a spent shell casing, that you can argue, and you can get some pretty good criminologist and a pretty good fingerprint person to argue over how much weight to the jury should give to a partial fingerprint when you don't have a full fingerprint. But the bottle, the DNA off that, you've got the partial fingerprint on the bullet, you got the firearm, you got the manifesto. I think it seems to be a pretty great case. But remember, when it comes down to it, he's being charged with under 2 theories. Theory 1 is murder first degree. He intended to cause, some sort of terror within intimidate a group of citizens, or B, just a regular cold-blooded murder. So their jury probably will, if they don't want to go for the terror, they may settle for murder too. So Alvin Bragg's given the prosecution the best overall chances of a conviction that they have.
Blissfulness essence on the scene. I thought they said first degree wouldn't be on the table because New York. I think Mike Geary just explained that to you.
Yeah,
why they went for first degree.
Yeah.
All right. Now it doesn't make a ton of sense because allegedly, murder first degree and second degree carry the same sentence: life in prison without parole. But as we know in New York, life in prison without parole does not mean that. And why do I say that? Because in the past year or 2 years, they've released numerous cop killers who got their sentence was life in prison without parole. So what does it actually mean, Mike?
Bill, I think and just looking at this and thinking about what Bragg's doing, what I'm guessing is, murder 2 is 25 is life behind bars without possibility of parole. But depending on what's going on in the state, maybe 25 years from now, 30 years from now, because remember, Luigi's only 26 years old. 30 years from now, he may serve 30 years, and he's still going to be younger than me and you when he's up. Maybe he may try to get some sort of commutation based on mercy. Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe his case would be heard, his plea would be heard by a parole board. But I think if they can get him convicted of murder 1, then any time he may ask for some sort of mercy from a parole board, they may say, no. This isn't murder. This is murder 2. This is murder 1. You were convicted of intending murder to terrorize New Yorkers. And for that, you will actually do your entire natural life. So maybe he's looking down the road, playing the long game legally to see what may happen 25, 30, 35 years down the line.
Mike, one of the things we found out here, which to me, there's at least 2 or 3 huge things we found out from this press conference, maybe more, maybe 4. All right. The murder first degree, murder second degree with the upgraded charge of terrorism in the charge. I don't think anyone totally expected that. We suggested it on our podcast several times. The other thing is the mom, Luigi Mangione's mom, was extremely concerned about him and said something like he was capable of something like this. How did she know this? That's part of this investigation. Our show last night, and I'm going to show you the thumbnail on the screen. R.J. Martin from Surf Break. Leave things better than you found them. Luigi Mangione lived at this place, Surf Break, in Hawaii, in Honolulu, Hawaii. It was sort of like a communal type place, but not an expensive. I think to get a single room with a king size bed was $2,300 a month, which by any big city standards, that's actually a pretty good bargain. But this was more than, it wasn't just a hotel. It was sort of a communal living type place. R.J. Martin, who you see on the screen there, he was the owner of this place. And it was more almost like a community. He used the word community all the time in his speaking, in his talking. What I found out from looking into R.J. Martin, the gentleman you see on the screen, he has a PhD in philosophy. So he's a highly educated guy. In this community, they had what was called a book club. So it seems like they were doing some teachings also. A book club, and they would read the book, and then as a group, on their own, of course, they would read the book, and then they would discuss the book. The book he recommended was the Unabomber's book, Ted Kaczynski's book. And we asked the question, could that have been what radicalized Luigi Mangione? And I'm not tossing allegations. I'm saying, is there a possibility that could have happened, Mike?
Yes, it could have. If you look at you gave me the website and you look at it, the word community is used constantly, community, 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 enclosed community, 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 self education, self-improvement, all of that stuff, leave things better, make things better than you found them. And those are great aspirational things. But strange when you get a person with a PhD in philosophy wants to read, Kaczynski's book. Now that's fine. You could read Ted Kaczynski's book. But to me, it's like reading something like say, for instance, Mein Kampf. You may read it for some sort of historical perspective, but as anything worthy of real philosophical discussion, really, this is what you're going to talk about? A man who's peeing in a bucket in the woods in like Wisconsin or Michigan, far from any sort of electricity and plumbing, and he's sending out bombs to people he's never met, trying to kill them. This is the kind of person that you're going to take seriously as offering anything of value in your philosophical pursuit of self-perfection? I don't see it. It's kind of strange. So maybe perhaps it was unwitting that he kind of in some ways overthought it and maybe self-radicalized by looking at this book from some person named Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and maybe beyond anybody else's expectations, really took it to heart more than just a philosophical discussion. Maybe he took it as kind of like in his own mind, Kaczynski's kind of right, except he just didn't do it correctly. His goals were admirable. He's right on a lot of his musings about technology and the individual in the world. And maybe he took it a little too far. I imagine he may have said something to his mother, maybe in some sort of text messages or emails, because how would she get the idea that, wow, it's kind of maybe could be my son. I'm not all that surprised, when she's talking to the police about this. That is a really scary thought, that the mom had actually some sort of knowledge that her son was capable of carrying out cold-blooded murder. So that shows that he has somehow, in the previous to the killing on December 4th, that he actually communicated some of these really strange thoughts to his mom.
And Mike, with this surf break sort of communal type living situation where they were, sharing things, talking, philosophizing as a community, reading books together, discussing. If someone like Luigi Mangione is mentally ill, and these ideas are being brought into his consciousness, and he's sympathetic to some of these causes, could that not do what we suggested radicalize him?
Sure.
Could that have radicalized him to the point? Look, Mike, the NYPD so far in this investigation is saying he acted alone. That is absolutely nonsense. There is no way he did this alone. Absolutely no. In my mind, I did 16 years in the detective bureau as a sergeant. All right. I did 10 in homicide. I worked in the 2-3 in Spanish Harlem. There is no way this guy did this alone. Absolutely no way. I will stake my reputation on that. I want to start seeing other people in handcuffs very soon.
Bill, you might, depending on what they get out of that cell phone and out of his email. There may be some very interesting communications between Luigi, and some friends. If it's just talk, that's one thing. But if there's any sort of encouragement and just purchasing his bus ticket for him, providing him with the ammunition, you got a ghost gun, the 3D printed gun, that's great. But you also got to remember, somebody's got to pay for that. You have to buy the barrel. You have to buy like the trigger and a few other things, the spring. There's a few things that you actually have to buy to insert in that ghost gun, that 3D printed gun, to actually make it operational. And so who provided those funds for that? Did somebody buy, say, the spring and the barrel for it? Who actually gave some sort of material aid to Luigi? If someone did, they better hope that there's nothing in Luigi's emails or cell phone records or text messages that indicates they did, because you do one, objective, meaningful act in furtherance of a homicide like this. That's conspiracy to commit murder. That'd be conspiracy to commit terrorism in this case. And that would make you a terrorist if you did those sorts of things. So yeah, there's going to be probably, I would think there's going to be at least one or two other people. If he's speaking freely to his mother and discussing some sort of, people need to die, like the CEO needs to die, or something really alarming, he talked to somebody else beside his mother.
Mike, a good point when we say there's no way he acted alone. Who made that ghost gun from? Right? There's no way he made a ghost gun. Where did he get that from? I mean, that takes, even though it's copied by a printer, it takes a very expensive machine to recreate that, right? So who did that for him? Right there, there's an accomplice right there.
Meaningful act right there.
Yes. So the other thing is the way he reconned and planned this, and the way certain things were set up for him along the route. The bike in the egress on 55th Street. Who left the bike there for him? Someone had to have left because he was seen coming out of the Starbucks walking, no bike. But when he fled and went to 55th Street, there was a bike there for him to get on, in the e-bike, and for him to make his escape, right? And then we find out other things down the road. Obviously, look, I understand the secrecy of investigation. The NYPD and the FBI is not releasing everything, because if they do, who does that help? It helps Luigi Mangione and his attorneys. So they're keeping it very quiet. But I would like to know, as we suggested last night, and we had the great attorney on from Brooklyn, another Mike, right?
Yeah,
Mike
Vecchione.
Mike Vecchione from the Brooklyn DA's office, a 40-year veteran. He mirrors exactly what we said. There's no way he did this on his own. There was absolutely no way. So the fear, therein lies the fear that there could be more or copycats to this behavior, because they know something that we do not know, Mike.
Yeah, there's somebody. Look, he talked to somebody besides his mom. He spread out his word. He spread his words of hatred for people and his philosophy. Some people may have taken it seriously. Some people may have just poo-pooed it. But if you provided him with any sort of funding, you provide him with that firearm. You provide him with parts of that firearm that couldn't be 3D printed. If you put the bike in the spot where he knew it would be after he did the shooting, you're providing that person that you're doing an act that's in furtherance of escaping from the crime. So all of these things, make you make a person amenable to being arrested and charged as a co-conspirator here. So yeah, to do this on his own, the idea that he never mentioned this to anybody, or maybe only talked to his mom, is farcical. Don't and I hope nobody really seriously believes that. He had at least one person helping him, giving him a meaningful assistance to commit it, and then also to get away with it at the end. So therefore, maybe, just maybe, the FBI, obviously keeping everything close to their vest because they don't share too much, but the police are probably keeping everything close to the vest because, as you say, and you and Phil know, and Mike Vecchione knows, there's so much more work to be done. The police will know more 30 days from now or 60 days from now. Wait till they get all the information dumped on the cell phone and on his laptop. They'll know a lot. There'll be a lot more people that need to be interviewed. And some people may be criminals, will be, lawyering up as criminal suspects themselves. So this isn't the beginning of the end. This is only the end of the beginning of the investigation.
100%. And something, the only solace I have, obviously, well, this Thursday, Luigi Mangione goes to court in Pennsylvania. They expect him to waive extradition and show up into New York City shortly thereafter. Finding out that his mom knew a lot more than, so if the mother knew all of this stuff, guess who knows it also? The investigators, either the FBI, the NYPD. They would have interviewed her in depth. How many friends, family members have the FBI? Every time I see an interview of a friend on television, it is the biggest softball interview I have ever watched in my entire life because the media is sympathetic with the cause of Luigi Mangione. And I'm saying that right out. They are interviewing these people with not even softballs. They're throwing them beach ball questions. They're not asking the difficult questions. Joining us today, I'm really thrilled to have her. She called me on her way home. Don't feel bad for her. She lives in northern Miami. She works at St. Thomas University. She's a criminologist. Welcome to the show, Dr. Debbie Goodman. Welcome, Dr. Debbie.
Hey, Doc.
Thank you, everybody. Hi, Sergeant Bill, Professor Mike, the
How are you?
viewers. Thank you so
Dr.
much.
Debbie,
South
I'm
Florida
gonna
traffic.
I'm going to push you into
let's
the
go.
water right away. You're not even going to dip your toes in.
Please.
All right.
Okay.
One of the
do
things that we found out, again, I don't know if you heard the press conference, but they announced he's being indicted for murder in the first degree, 1 count, and 2 counts of murder in the second degree, but special circumstances, a terroristic act. All right.
Yeah.
The other thing we learned today is that his mother was worried that he was capable of doing something like this. This is the first time we're hearing this. Before this, we were just hearing, oh, no, he's this genius. He's a pacifist. He's thisist. He's thatist. Now we're hearing right from his blood. No, he had some serious problems, and he was capable of this. Dr. Debbie.
Absolutely. Well, once again, thank you so much, Sergeant Bill, Professor Mike, the viewers. What an absolutely astonishing case day by day as more information is revealed. So I created a theory. I like to do that as a criminologist. Once I do a deep dive on a case, and we've talked about many on your program. And so for this one, if I may, I will introduce the theory that I created on the Luigi Mangione case, and I'm calling it WAR, W-A-R. And I believe that he felt and continues to feel wronged, hence the W, A for action, and R for right. So if we go through this, I think he felt he was wronged, Sergeant Bill, Professor Mike, in whatever happened to him with this pain issue. So going through surgery or preceding surgery and the aftermath, something went wrong for Luigi. And then what? He decided, I believe, 100% with the first degree murder charges. And we know the elements, and I'm sure you and Professor Mike already went through them, but once again, planning, premeditation, willful with malice, 100%, that had to have happened. He took that action to kill Brian Thompson. There's no coincidence when it comes to murder, as we know. And then lastly, the R for the war acronym is right, R-I-G-H-T. I think even now he feels, Luigi Mangione feels that he is right with the course of action he has taken. And what is so surprising and startling, certainly to me, and perhaps to both of you and the viewers, is how many people are literally applauding him and expressing admiration for him. And it's like this, dwarf versus the giant, and the applause and the accolades he's getting as, let's call it, the little person standing up to the big conglomerate. But I think he went to war on this. I'm 100% in agreement with first degree, second degree, and terrorism.
Absolutely. Dr. Debbie, all of us, at least, and I'm not going to include you, but you probably will agree with us. I know your personality. All of us, we admit and we acknowledge there are problems with the healthcare industry in this country. But neither myself, Mike, or Michael Vecchione, or you got a 9mm ghost gun and went to kill a CEO because we had problems with the healthcare industry, or what other, any other industry that you feel wronged by. That does not give you the right to commit a murder. And, especially egregious for all these online cowards that are backing this guy up. He shot him in the back. Going back to cowboy gunfights, that is the biggest sign of a coward, someone that shoots someone in the back. Professor Mike.
Yeah, Bill, the thing about Mangione is, remember, he got health care. He was diagnosed. He had a long-term issue with his back. For some reason, he said to people that was slightly misaligned. I guess it's like a slight touch of maybe scoliosis. I guess it's the proper term to use. And so it affected him somewhat, a little bit growing up, and he aggravated it. And he got health care taken care of. He got an operation. He got whatever painkillers he got, whatever physical therapy he got. He actually was not shut out from health care. He actually got health care. And he got, something that was, he talked about later on to some of his friends, that it made his back feel better and that he could get back to doing certain things. Yeah, there was some pain, of course, but he got back up on his feet and was able to do things. He's not sitting in a wheelchair anywhere. So in a weird way, it's kind of hypocritical that he would, attack someone from the healthcare industry, a representative in the healthcare industry, shoot him in the back over an issue that actually wasn't personal to him. It might have been a philosophical issue, but it wasn't personal to him because he got what he asked for in terms of medical care. He didn't, we talked about this the other day. What happens if you don't like the health care you're getting from a nurse? You shoot her. What happens if somebody sells you a car and it's a terrible car and it breaks down all the time? You're going to go back and shoot the salesman. At what point do you say, this is not something to do? You cannot solve your problems this way. There he is shooting a man in the back in cold blood on a cold winter's day at like 6:45 in the morning. And there is simply no excuse for murdering somebody that you don't like. It doesn't make sense.
Mike, and the other side of the coin who says, oh, Brian Thompson killed hundreds of people. Really? Did he really? Do you mean United Healthcare because they denied claims they indirectly killed people? Is that what you're trying to say? So you're saying directly that the CEO, Brian Thompson, a 50-year-old man, father of two, mother, father, dad, neighbor, friend, that he deserved to be shot in the back and his life taken from him because this healthcare CEO he was no good, and neither was that company. So that's how we should, in our society, how we should get back at people that run large corporations who we disagree with. Dr. Debbie.
100% what you just said, Sergeant Bill, and I agree with Professor Mike. Let's just call it what it is. 2 words: vigilante justice. And this is exactly what's happened here when one's ideology is such that they want to take matters into their own hands, and we cannot allow it. And I think all of the charges are aligned with what should be, severe penalty on this one. It's interesting. I was on a platform yesterday talking about a very interesting element also that you may have discussed, but I think it's important. Hybristophilia, it's its own category and classification of criminology, whereby individuals become interested in, fascinated with, enamored by criminals, and the likes of whom we have seen time and time again, with fan clubs being formulated for people like the Menendez brothers and Ted Bundy, Chris Watts, Scott Peterson. And it's not only reserved for male criminals, but certainly females as well. Jodi Arias, Susan Smith, Casey Anthony. And, when we talk about forensic psychology, which always makes its way into these conversations, I think we can also address 3 important points, and that would be fantasy, fanatic. I think it's very normal when people are fans of things like sports and athletes and musicians, actors, actresses. And then the fan base kind of at times could move into the fantasy realm, which is still within the wheelhouse of normal, whereby one wants to potentially go to a venue where they think their favorite celebrity is and they want to meet them. Okay, but now we go to phase 3 and the fanaticism that I think has taken place here within 1 week of nobody knew who this Luigi Mangione is or was. All of a sudden, it's the lead story for days and will continue to be. And I just have to shake my head in disbelief when people are really so, applauding of this individual when he killed, as you've said, not only Brian Thompson as a CEO, but a husband, a father for no, legitimate cause. Whatever Luigi Mangione's ideology is, okay, everybody has a thought and opinion, but as Professor Mike said, because we're with discord or disharmony with either an individual or an entity, now we're seemingly allowed to just go and take matters into our own hands and kill people. Astonishing.
No, you're 100% right. From the chat, AW727. Hey, Bill, I work in healthcare. I'd like to remind people that a claim is submitted after the healthcare has already been performed. Maybe he was mad about them denying prior authorizations. AW727, you could be right. But I think what we're seeing here, and I really believe this, and I believe he was radicalized in some way, where it was more about an ideological bent than something personal that happened to him. Did he have back pain? Absolutely. Apparently he was never a client of United Healthcare, according to their records. But so again, going back to a bigger thing, an ideological bent, not a personal bent. So thank you for your comments, because they absolutely ring true. But I think in this, it's bigger than this. I think he was hanging out with a group of people, and somehow he got radicalized. And did he get radicalized because he had a mental illness, or because of his pain, or perhaps he was abusing painkillers? I can't answer that. This is a huge investigation. When we had Mike Vecchione on last night and Mike Geary, two bigger minds than mine, we discussed that this seems to be an ideological thing, that he somehow was radicalized. And all 3 of us agreed. All 3 of us have been in law enforcement for decades and decades. So that's what I'm looking for. And we also said about 20% of this investigation has been completed. 80% needs to be completed. And then we'll get some of the answers to these very questions we're raising right now. Professor Mike.
Yeah, Billy, when we were talking with Mike Vecchione, I kind of talked about this culture, and he had also mentioned the culture of like victimization culture, a culture of outrage where many people, not all, but many people feel that They've been victimized by, say, a big corporation, the Ford Motor Company, Chrysler, a big construction company that did work on their house, a city government, a town government where, they can't fight City Hall. The entity's too big for them. And so they want to, write a letter. Most people would write a letter, or today send a email, to a nasty email to the mayor or to the CEO. But this culture of outrage has, unfortunately, a fanatical bent to it for some people. Here he is with this group of people. He gets turned on. And maybe the people who he spoke to and the people who are just having some really weird philosophical view and talk about Ted Kaczynski, maybe for some reason he just picked a little part of his brain, and his interest grew beyond reason. And so he took on this cause that many people would say, yeah, our healthcare, we've been talking about this for 30 years, and the can gets kicked down the road by our politicians, and really nobody's doing anything about it. Somewhere along the line, he goes from a philosophical to a discussion to, okay, I'm going to now plot to do something. What I want to know is, and we'll know this soon enough once they download all the information on his laptop and his cell phone, is I want to see what was the first instance where it seemed to be that he decided, maybe an email to somebody, text message to somebody, that where he actually mentioned, I want to take somebody out. And if you could figure out maybe kind of like the exact day or something around that time, you could see who at that point, who had he just spoken to, and that is something that would give me a lot better information about, how the process of radicalization worked in this particular instance.
Could be, Mike. From the chat, Jill Serhant, this surf break community involvement reminds me of the premise of the movie Point Break. Very possibly that has been suggested before. Hilal Sarsour, I think maybe the months that he was MIA and no one knew where he was since July, because he literally just disappeared all of a sudden. Maybe he was involved with people who radicalized him. Very possible, Hillel. Very possible. We've been suggesting that. That is absolutely a possibility here. Adriana Morales, I really hope they look into this R.J. Martin fellow. You know something? If the FBI watched our show last night, they were on the next plane. But or they could just there's an office in Hawaii, I'm sure. And I think everyone that stayed at Surf Break for the past year or 2 years needs to be interviewed. I really believe that. They need to do an extensive interview about what is going on. And again, maybe they come up clean, but that is one of the investigative steps that they absolutely need to take. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, just hit that red subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up, hit that like button, and share us with your friends and your family. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. We also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels. You could become a member of the Police Off the Cuff family. Dr. Debbie, it's really good to get a fresh perspective in. Mike and I have been covering this since December 4th when it occurred, and I think, we've had some great investigative minds on this show. Again, we mentioned Mike Vecchione, Phil Grimaldi, of course, has been on, Professor Mike, and I don't list mine as the greatest mind with these guys along the Mount Everest of as soon as I was saying the Mount Rushmore, I meant. See, I even said the wrong thing. The Mount Rushmore of law enforcement. But Dr. Debbie, I mean, can you believe that Luigi Mangione got this idea all by himself, wrote up a manifesto, has notes how to, did a recon, gets a ghost gun, plans this whole thing over a period of about 10 or 11 days, carries it out, and almost got away with it. Almost got out of, did get out of New York City. And because of the saturation of his picture all over nationally and internationally, he gets caught in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Your thoughts, Dr. Debbie?
Well, here's the perfect moment to again not only commend the participants of Mount Rushmore, but truly the almost 1 million law enforcement representatives we have today, local, state, and federal, men and women who do so much for so many, and also the citizens, by the way, because we know that played a pivotal role in all of this. But back to the first part of the question, Sergeant Bill, can I believe that it happened? I can believe it, but again, it's a little out of the textbook, let's call it, right? When we look at who potentially would be a murderer, whether it's a singular homicide, double, triple, quadruple, serial murderer, mass murderer, school-based violence, workplace violence, it deviates considerably from the norm. So yes, we know academically he was intelligent and the valedictorian status and an Ivy League education, but I do agree with you and Mike that somewhere along the way, and yes, it would be great if we could pinpoint exactly, the time, the date, the location, but I do agree with you, and I appreciate your phrase and your term about becoming radicalized, and some way, somehow, the ideology that he was thinking through became extremely flawed. But what I can tell you as an academician and as a criminologist, it's not uncommon for these people, right? These people, meaning the murderers among us in society, to really become attached to thinking that is similar to their own. So I know on your program you have talked considerably about Ted Kaczynski and the fact that Luigi Mangione would be interested in reading a book and learning more about Kaczynski, and ultimately at some point thinking he was heroic. Believe it or not, that little piece to the puzzle is not so uncommon. Why? Because we can also look back at some of our modern day participants and killers who do something very similar, even though we'll use the word alleged. I know that's important, but the alleged quadruple murderer from Idaho, Brian Koberger, with whom did he seem quite enamored and wanted to study BTK, Dennis Rader, and became very interested in Dennis Rader's thoughts, and he may have adopted those thoughts for himself. And if we look at the school-based shooters of recent day, we have this 14-year-old Colt Gray, who also had interest in the shooter from Michigan, Ethan Crumley. So I know informally we're calling a lot of this copycat, more formally textbook, we say contagion effect. But I am concerned about that now, Sergeant Bill and Professor Mike. The contagion effect, are we going to see, and we certainly hope not, but copycats, those who were teeter-tottering on the mental health scale, who may potentially think, gee, this might be a good idea because I can get the attention and garner the spotlight. And that would be a concern.
Very well spoken, Dr. Debbie. I can tell you spend hours and hours and hours in front of a classroom giving lectures because that was very well said. I sort of have a theory in my own mind and based on my street instincts that people that do things like this also are weakened somehow, weakened in their mental health. And I think specifically in this case, because I know I almost sound like a broken record. I cannot see that he acted alone. I cannot see that at all. So did people urge him on to do this? Did people push him to do this? Was he the weak link in a group of people that were all radicalized? Was he the one ready to go? Was he the robot ready to do this dirty deed? Professor Mike.
Yeah, Billy, is he, that's a good question. Is he this kind of like a Manchurian candidate kind of person? Like a person who's there, they've been trained, they're vulnerable, all they need is somebody to tell them to do it and they turn on? Or is he so weak in his personality that he felt like he's not contributing to his peer group and maybe he needed to do something to garner some sort of respect, from other people? You guys are talking about making things better. I can do it. I'm the one with the guts enough to go out there and actually take a philosophical point and make it reality. I'm going to do something that's going to shake everybody's mind. Just watch what's going to happen. We don't know. It's kind of crazy. We'll learn more. And Dr. Debbie's right. You know, you're looking at you're studying him, trying to figure out where, when, how, who he was with, what he was reading, what was he beforehand, before he joined this group. How suggestible was this kind of idea to him? Was it something that he would have done anyway? Or maybe he never thought he would ever do anything like that. And then he just falls in with a group of people. And maybe since they're all newbies and techies, perhaps there was, in a strange way, some sort of peer pressure just gently applied. And he needed to fulfill something in him, that he needed to do something really strong, a strong move to maybe increase his level of respect in the group. I'm not sure.
You know, this has become sort of a pop culture darling. Let me use that word, that he's admired. Does everyone out there want to kill a CEO because you've been wronged by that company? Is it that people hitting against capitalism as opposed to socialism, which, you see, show me, a socialist that, well, for example, many of these socialists are rich through capitalism, but they preach socialism, but they don't live it. They want you to live socialism and they want to live capitalism, So were these people being brainwashed? And I'm still enamored by the fact that I believe somehow Luigi Mangione was radicalized through some type of brainwashing. I really feel that in my bones, in my NYPD cop instincts. I feel that. Dr. Debbie.
I certainly think it's possible, but I also have a slightly different view on this, Sergeant Bill, Professor Mike, in that, remember, narcissism, grandiosity, these elements are very much at the forefront of people who kill. And they tend to think that they're smarter than the rest of us, and particularly they think they're smarter than law enforcement. So in a way, based on what both of you are saying, I certainly agree he may have been pushed gently, to use Professor Mike's verbiage, and or in a group of individuals who had the same mentality and he wanted to stand out and stand up, so to speak. But I'd much rather use the term cowardice and cowardly rather than some of what we're seeing online where people want to say bold and brazen. I cannot subscribe to that type of thought process or mentality, but I'm just wondering again with both of you and the viewers, if he really just ultimately wanted to stand alone and be the one to do it because he thought he could. He most likely planned it quite well for a lengthy period of time. And I don't think that he thought he would get caught. Once again, most of them just think they're not getting caught. They're taking whatever aftermath steps, let's call it, to elude law enforcement. But once again, the commendation to our professionals in the field as well as the citizens to get involved. See something, say something. That's so important. But I think as the days and weeks will be forthcoming, more information to be revealed. But at this moment, I do think he demonstrates the grandiosity and the narcissism that would lead me to believe that it may have been just an act that he individually wanted to perpetrate, and in his mind, successfully.
Dr. Debbie, you raised a point there that made me think of something right away, in that he wasn't done. He was not done. This was going to be his first of a couple more killings had he not been caught, because there's only one reason to keep the gun, because you want to use it again. All right. Because or else it's a liability, and it is a huge liability because it matched up to the crime scene. Right. Because we mentioned early on in this investigation, and Mike sitting right there was the person who I leveled the question. And I said, Mike, if they don't find this gun, he might beat this case. And this is when they were diving in the lake in Central Park, NYPD scuba, looking for this gun. And I said right out to Mike, Mike, if they don't find this gun, this guy could walk. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, it's a much weaker case. They may still win it. You still get an indictment because you're only looking at probable cause, but going to trial, looking ahead, a year, that gun is huge. If you don't have the gun, and maybe you only have a partial fingerprint on a bullet, that's okay. That's good, but maybe not good enough. And say you don't have the manifesto, you start taking away the fingerprints, the manifesto, the firearm, and all you've got is mostly, I'm not going to say coincidence, but you have a lot weaker case. It's a lot weaker circumstantial case. But his DNA puts him right there. The fingerprint puts him right there. But that firearm is huge because and also as a prosecutor, once you introduce that firearm with your ballistics expert, you want to show that to the jury. You want them to hold it. You want them. It's a very, very different feeling talking about something, but then you get this tactile sense because you're holding the actual firearm in your hand and the jurors can actually see it and they may even touch it and pass it around among themselves. That gun is huge. That's the because it's so singular, because it's not a partial fingerprint that's just smeared. It's not a handwriting analysis, maybe on something else. You've got that firearm. That's big. And you're right. Having that is probably an indication that it was a valuable thing that he had. He wanted to keep it. And they probably was going, if he got away with it, maybe 6 months from now, he would hunt down someone else, some other CEO, maybe in a different industry. Who knows? But you're right. He probably was thinking to the future. And what would I do with this gun? Having that firearm kill someone else 6 months from now, that would send even a stronger statement, because he even might know that gun, the firearm, the ballistics results from the shooting in December 4th, to a future shooting would be done by the same firearm. So there people would see that someone is actually going around and hunting down CEOs of corporations that, in his mind, need to die.
And the ballistics would match if he
Yeah.
did it a second time, and they would say, we got a big problem here.
Yeah.
Dr. Debbie, someone from the chat is asking you a question.
Yes.
Top Cat 88, does Dr. Debbie think he has one or more personality disorders? Dr. Debbie is not a psychologist, but she is a criminologist. So I'll let her answer that question, even though
Sure.
it might be out of
No,
her lane. Okay.
No, I would like to, and I was asked that also recently on a platform. So I'm going to answer no. I do not think he has a split personality nor bipolar. And why I was asked that question a few days ago was, if we remember the clip, and I'm sure you showed it on the program, but it was him getting out of a vehicle and going into the courtroom, and he was, screaming in essence what the ideology was. And then I was asked, well, does that indicate split personality? And I don't think so whatsoever. I think it's, again, he's a smart individual. Now, how smart can one be if they get caught, right? We all like to say that in the field, and that's the good news. But he's looking around him. He's aware of his environment. Anytime he's being transported to and from a location, he sees 50 cameras around the globe to wait for him and anything and everything. So I think even moments of time where he may appear angry or he may really have a heightened level of intensity, I don't think there's split personality at all. I think it's almost more timing, making sure people hear him and what he stands for and what he believes.
Very well said, Dr. Debbie, even though you took a little bit out of your lane, but you're in the lane. Very,
In the
very well
lane.
said. Urban
Thank you.
infidel. His mother knew, which means that the perp has a history of acting out and psychopath behaviors. Wow. Well, I mean, I don't know if you could draw a conclusion based on that, but there's no doubt his mother knew, Mike.
Yeah, the fact that she would be candid enough to say, this is kind of like the thing that I'm afraid that maybe Luigi could have done this sort of thing. When who knows their own child better than a mom, and to say that, it could have been something that he would do. That's frightening to think that on first blush, reflexive answer is, yeah, I think it could be Luigi. That's really scary because she knew something previously that maybe he threatened, maybe he was talking about, maybe in anger, he said something to her about the healthcare industry. And then suddenly, boom, this shooting happens. And she's like, oh, that probably was my son that did that. That's very telling when you interview a suspect's mother and they're like, yeah, I could see him doing that sort of thing. You know, you shake your head and you go, okay, we definitely have the right guy. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. Even his own mother thinks he did it.
You know, Mike, that's pretty scary that she said that.
Yeah.
Very scary, in fact. God bless us, everyone from the chat. I think you guys here have nailed the psychology behind it. I think he was in a group of fantasizers, but he failed to see further down the road that he wouldn't get to enjoy a Robin Hoodish celeb status.
Yeah.
You know, there are, God bless us, everyone. There are indications that he did want notoriety. You know, he put on that big show, getting out of the police car and going into the jail in Pennsylvania. So yes, there is something to be said based on the fact that he had a manifesto in his backpack. He had writings, how he planned the whole thing, how he kept the gun, how he kept the backpack. All those are indicators that, well, maybe he wanted to get caught. Dr. Debbie.
Right, I agree with that premise, but I'll just add something to it if I may, and also remember the component of hedonism that tends to be very consistent among murderers. They are pleasure seekers, so the pleasure comes for them from beginning, middle to the end. Beginning, they're planning it out, they're devising their plan. And the middle, they're carrying out the atrocity. And now the end piece for them, the aftermath, is the notoriety. And I think Sergeant Bill, Professor Mike, and the viewers, for so many individuals, Luigi Mangione directly, and so many who've come before him, and unfortunately those who may come after him, they are looking for attention and spotlight. And another theory I created, the Lilliputian theory. You know, Lilliputian, sometimes people feel little, and it has nothing to do with their height or their breadth or their stature. These are individuals who generally, we don't know their name going through school, middle school, high school, when it comes to these school-based shooters, and individuals who maybe are not really the recipients of respect and admiration and professionalism. Therefore, they want to do something that they think is big and that the whole world will then know who they are. And I really think most of whom enjoy this type of spotlight attention they're receiving when we are talking about them and all the elements, who, what, when, where, why, and how. But I do think, obviously, as a professor and criminologist, it's important for us to discuss so we can understand if there is any understanding behind the motivation for such a shocking display of evil.
Dr. Debbie and Mike, I cannot help but looking at the point that it's almost like, and I've said this on other shows, he was striking back at the very same type of people or persons that he's from, a family he's from. His family owned 12 nursing homes. They are ultimate capitalists. They are ultimate CEOs. They own real estate. They own 2 country clubs. They own the radio station. And he's hitting back at this part of society that someone convinced him to hate. Mike.
Yeah, just think about it. If they've got a number of nursing homes, they're going to have probably people who need PT, OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy. They're going to have people there who are sick. They're going to have to call an ambulance. They're going to maybe have a doctor on call themselves to take care of some geriatric patients. So there is some intertwining between his issue with the healthcare industry and his own family's healthcare. They may not be doing operations on anybody, but they are certainly helping elderly people get some basic care. So the idea that it's not a rejection of maybe his upbringing, or maybe he feels like he is being a hypocrite because he's gotten so much in life from his that school, I think Milton, whatever is that high school in Maryland. I think
Gilman.
that's what's it?
Gilman. Mhm.
Gilman. Thank you, Gilman. Yeah, it's like $30,000 a year, 40,000. It's an incredible amount of money that can only be done if his family's got a whole lot of change in their pocket, and so therefore, and he goes to an Ivy League school, gets 2 degrees. So he's a kid of privilege, and maybe somewhere down the line, when he's talking about this philosophical stuff with these people in Honolulu, maybe he's feeling a little guilty, and maybe he feels like he needs to actually, excuse me, strike out, because it will cleanse him of any guilt that he has about how much privilege he's gotten and how much of the healthcare industry, his family's been involved in.
Very good.
We're conjecturing a lot,
Yeah.
but we're taking some educated guesses based on our backgrounds and things like that. This case is purely fascinating. It really is fascinating, and there's so many aspects to it. And when we talk about the two sides, the law enforcement side that doesn't care what his political bent is, he shot and killed someone in cold blood on the street and shot them in the back. That's the bottom line. That supersedes everything else. The other side is the people that are sympathetic to Luigi Mangione because he killed the representation of healthcare. And we hate healthcare in this country. We hate the way it's dispensed. We hate the way it's dispersed. We hate the way that they turn down, this is the word I'm looking for. They turn down people putting in for certain procedures, and they have the procedure, and then they don't pay them. So yes, we all hate that, but it does not ever give anyone the right to pick up a gun and shoot someone in cold blood on the street. It does not. And if the day society allows that is the day that we fall apart as a society. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, because it's the slippery slope. When is it not okay? If it's okay to kill, the CEO of the United Healthcare, is it okay to kill a doctor who did a surgery on you and you didn't like the results, or a nurse that gave you some treatment in hospital that you didn't like, or the Ford dealership or the Chrysler dealership where you bought a car and it turned out to be a real lemon? At what point does approval become non-approval and bad, and we can condemn it? So that's why you actually have to condemn it, because it's not a gradation of righteousness or wrongfulness. It's either right or wrong. And if it's right, then killing everybody, it's total anarchy. If it's wrong, then killing anybody is like that is wrong. So we have, the people who are, in the culture of outrage and express these sort of aggressive ideas online and want to start a GoFundMe page for him. He doesn't need a GoFundMe page. This kid comes from wealth. His parents are going to have provided him with the best criminal defense attorney that anybody could have in the United States. So, anybody who feels like, that he is some sort of Robin Hood kind of person, or he's doing society some good, or it's okay what he did, I feel sorry for them. I really do.
On this page here, on this thumbnail here, is his attorney, Karen Friedman Agnifilo. She's a former Manhattan assistant district attorney. She was the second in charge under Cyrus Vance. And she's very well experienced. She's an outstanding attorney. Her husband happens to be representing P. Diddy. So they're a family of lawyers, but she's an outstanding attorney. But outstanding attorneys don't come cheap. They don't come free. And we're reading that online. They're trying to raise, I don't know, anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 to pay for his defense fund. As you said, Mike, he's from a wealthy family. They could afford to pay for it. But it seems like people want to contribute because this is the cause celeb that
Exactly.
they want to pay for. Guys, we're going to go around. Final thoughts. I want to thank everyone for coming in today. We went live as soon as we saw Alvin Bragg having a press conference. Some new information to recap. Luigi Mangione has been indicted for murder in the first degree based on a terroristic act, and 2 counts of murder in the second-degree terrorism also mentioned in the second-degree charge. We found out that his mother made a statement to the police. Yes, he is capable of doing that. We were like, whoa, where did that come from, right? So we're finding out new things every single day about this case, but yet much of it is being held close to the vest by the NYPD and the FBI. So there's a great deal more of investigation to occur. This Thursday, Luigi Mangione is supposed to be going to court in Pennsylvania, and they're expecting him to waive extradition and to come to New York shortly thereafter that. Mike, your final thoughts.
Just for people to be patient, I'm sure there will be a very tight lid placed on the police department, and maybe there will be a gag order imposed by the judge in this case when it gets assigned a judge. But again, just be patient, and we'll bring you all the information as it comes to us at POTC here. But just be patient, and probably about every once in a while we'll get some more information. But expect that there'll be gag order. Don't pay attention to rumors because people try to foist rumors as fact. Don't fall for that. Come to POTC if you want the truth.
Absolutely. Dr. Debbie, thank you so much. Dr. Debbie was heading home from St. Thomas University in northern Miami, and she called me on the phone and she said, Bragg's live. I go, I know, we're on the air live. And I said, if you want to come on the air, I'll send you the link. She goes, all right, I'll be home in 10 minutes. And she got home and she went right on the air. No preparation, no makeup, no sound check. Here she is. Dr. Debbie, thank you for coming on. Your final thoughts.
Oh, my pleasure as always. Thank you so much for the honor, Sergeant Bill, Professor Mike, the viewers. You're right. It's a very fascinating case with a lot of levels and layers. We're, tippy-toeing into it all, and just based thus far, there's so much to discuss, more forthcoming, but at least for today and the new development, I absolutely agree with the first-degree murder charges, the second-degree charges, as well as terrorism. And I think in part, hopefully, if individuals are out there with, thoughts about doing something along these lines, that it will also send a deterrent effect, that we just simply cannot have vigilante justice in our streets. And yes, people are entitled to think what they think, but as we know in criminology, we always say mens rea actus reus. Guilty mind is one thing, the thinking about the crime, but it's something entirely different to actually perpetrate it. So again, innocent until proven guilty, but thus far, I think we have the right guy with a lot of evidence pointing in the direction of a lengthy prison term, and rightfully so. 2 families have been destroyed. Luigi Mangione's family certainly will never be the same, and nor will Brian Thompson's family, leaving behind a wife and 2 children. But thank you for the opportunity, as always, to discuss, and very much believing in and loving our field of criminal justice, and I think we'll see the right outcome.
Thank you, Dr. Debbie. You're always very smooth in your final final thoughts. Anyway, folks, again, thank you so much for tuning in. We had no warning. We just boom went on. And Mike Geary, you're getting better and better every time you do this. And the fact that we can come on here with no plans, no script, and stay on the air for almost an hour and a half is a credit to the Police Off the Cuff institution here and family. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in this afternoon. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff. Have a great night, everyone, and God bless. One episode just ain't enough.